Thank you, everyone, for being here today. We're called to order at 5 o'clock. We're going to start out with item B as in Bravo on the agenda, a moment of silence. Let's go ahead and observe that if we could, please. Commissioner Misnardi, if you care to give it a shot telephonically, would you lead us in the pledge?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
May I have a motion as to item D as in Delta, the approval of the February 6, 2020 meeting minutes? We have a motion and a second for that. All in favor of approval of the February 6 minutes, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. All right, we'll start out with resolutions. Before we do that, though, we've got a couple of folks that I know were invited to come here and speak. So if we could start with Maria Stahl, the administrator for FDOH here in Brevard. Then we have the deputy mayor of West Melbourne, John Ditmore, as well. Maria, welcome.
All seen the dashboard that was released earlier today. We currently have 95 cases. We have 28 in the hospital. We have 6 on ventilators, and unfortunately, we did have 2 deaths reported. One last night and one earlier this morning. So that is unfortunate. Where we are right now with our testing is our numbers at our collection sites at the health department is very low. So what we have done is we do have to keep it to the symptomatic testing because that's the CDC DOH guidelines. But for the priority 3 people, which are those that have symptoms, we were requiring a doctor's note because our priority really was the elderly population and those with comorbidities. But since we're not filling our slots, we've opened it up to say anyone with symptoms, we're not requiring a doctor's note. So if they have symptoms, they can come in and they can be tested. The same thing, call the number 321-454-7141, where we do the screening and the registration so they can just drive through. So we have plenty of availability at this time. As I say, 100 slots, we have about 28 slots being taken. So we're opening that up starting tomorrow. But that's really the only updates that I have, unless any of you have questions.
Maria, just briefly on that topic before I turn it over to Commissioner Tabaya. Obviously, your Viera clinic is doing testing. What about other clinics in the
other
county?
Clinics, what we have done is we will do them at the other clinics. We have the capacity to do them at the Titusville and the Melbourne clinic. What we don't have in those clinics, though, is as good of a drive-through. Okay. The Viera clinic has a very good drive-through. So as they're calling, we're asking them, are you okay with going to the Viera clinic? And everybody has been at this point. However, like I said, we have the capacity and we can do it at the other 2 sites. That's not a problem. We have the test kits at the other 2 sites. We have the PPE at the other 2 sites. So we definitely would if needed to.
Thank you. Commissioner Tabaya?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to say disturbing email that we got from our EOC, but it dealt with 1,000 collection kits that were, it sounds like, errantly sent to Broward County instead of Brevard County. Do you want to speak to that? And second of all, it sounds like we've got testing kits under control right now, but as things unfold, what has been put in place to make sure that hopefully uncommon error of mixing Broward and Brevard County up doesn't happen in the future?
Right. I don't know if it was 1,000 kits because I was never notified how many kits. There were kits slated to come to Brevard the end of last week, which actually had Broward County with a Palm Beach address on it. I called both counties, Broward and Palm Beach. Neither one of them claims to have received them. If they did or didn't, I don't know. I did contact Tallahassee, and they did send us new kits. We got those today. So we did not, it was not 1,000 that we got 300. We got those today. There's another set of kits that were received in emergency management. I know Kim's in here yesterday. Yes. There's another set of kits, 1,000, that were received in emergency management yesterday. However, we're on hold on using those kits because the medium in there has not been officially approved by FDA. So we're on a hold with those. Hopefully it will be approved and we'll be able to use those. But as of right now, we did get 300. And like I said, Commissioner Tabaya, I do not know if it was 1,000 that went on to Broward and Palm Beach. They did not tell me, but they did replace it with 300.
Sure, please, sir.
Yeah, I'm just referencing the email right here. I'm sure you have it, but it says the collection kits were being sent to Brevard County last week, were accidentally sent to Broward County by FDOH Tallahassee. We contacted FDEM, and they are sending 1,000 kits to Brevard now. So,
And Kim got 1,000 yesterday, and I think she got confirmation today that she's getting another 2,000.
okay.
She's nodding, it looks like.
Is that, are you nodding, is that correct?
It looks like an
Okay.
affirmative.
And we also did get another 300 also. We got the 300 and we got another 300, but that 300 also has the medium that we're on hold on. Hopefully it'll get approved and we can use those, but that's where we're at on all of that.
And I'll point out as well, and Kim's welcome to come up if she'd like to give the stats, but essentially, what I was told by Kim a few minutes ago is that we're aware, and this is a floor, there could be more that we're not aware of. We're aware of at least, and this is as of Sunday, 2,200 tests having been administered with 530 results still pending, and that includes some or all of the MedFast, Health First, Steward, so Rockledge and Melbourne Regional, Parrish, and Omni as of Sunday. Testing in addition to Brevard Health Alliance. So there were another 400 that we were made aware of today. So we know of at least 2,600 tests having been run in Brevard. Now, if you assume the 400 aren't ready, which is probably a safe assumption if they were run today, regardless of where they were sent, we have about 930 that we're waiting on results for. So just to give us ballparks, and it may be a little better if you have a private practice that's running them, with a one-off here or a couple there. They're not going to be reflected in that, but that's an absolute floor of about 2,600 that we've had run in the county thus far.
And I'll also say, right now, the positivity rate, average positivity rate is about 10%. Of the cases. So I'll also say that the turnaround time at both the state lab and the private labs have gotten better. The state lab is having about a 24-hour turnaround. The private labs are having 4 days. And it was up to 10 days, so that is a much better turnaround.
It's interesting. I don't have the stats in front of me at the moment. I know they were discussed earlier today during the Facebook Live that you participated in. But Health First, as of, I believe, yesterday, their positivity rate was just a touch under 5.6%. And it was out of a good number of kits, out of hundreds of kits. So I don't know, whether it's their geographic location that has a markedly lower result or what that might be attributable to, but it's something that's interesting, if nothing else. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyone have any questions for Maria online? Commissioner Smith or Isnardi?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
Something just came over my wife's phone that 2 Titusville firefighters have been tested positive. Do you know anything about that?
Yes.
Yeah, we'd heard 3 down here.
2.
Is it 2?
Yes. Yes, and our epidemiology department is aware of it and have done the contact tracing and is dealing with it. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Isnardi, do you have anything?
Not right now.
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you so much
All right.
again for keeping us in the loop.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and last, before we move on to resolutions, our Deputy Mayor of Wemel, John Ditmore. Welcome, sir. And I've got a mouse here. I think this should work it if we can get the,
Do you have a I printed out copies. But
Yeah, let me see if we can get it on here, just
Okay,
so the
that's
folks
fine.
watching can get it too. Logan, can you help me out with the screen to get the proper one on there? All right, we've got the 3 PDFs, but I also have the images themselves.
Yeah, I'm just going to be probably going over the images more than anything today.
Okay, you want me to pull up one first here,
Uh,
or the next one?
Yeah, you can keep it up there. You can keep that up there for right now, and
Yes, sir.
then we'll go to reference it. That'll be fine. Okay, good afternoon. Thank you, Commissioner Lober, for inviting me out today. I just want to discuss with you our efforts in the city of West Melbourne and how those numbers are, and those efforts are impacting our preliminary numbers. The results currently from the Florida Department of Health indicate that we are having some positive impact, and we believe this to be to the message that we've been giving the public. When I spoke earlier last week, I mentioned that we've been working with our grocery retailers to promote proactive program of social distancing during their opening hours. Since I've spoke, several of the stores now have implemented a nationwide policy to limit store capacity. Okay, I recommend that you consider adopting the policy that Walmart has in place, and that policy is that they have 5 persons per 1,000 square foot. This would have an enormous effect over the social transmission of COVID-19 in our retail grocery locations. So basically, they have 5, they're allowed to go in per 1,000 square foot, and then it's one in, one out afterwards. I think it's a great policy, I think, at least till we get through this time period. Second of all, the most recent report from the Florida Department of Health is that our city has 2 confirmed cases of COVID-19. Our neighboring city of Melbourne has 30. We both have areas of our respective reported zip codes that are in unincorporated counties in the county. So the areas in the report are not necessarily in the city limits of each. However, Melbourne is 4 times our city in size and population, but is 15 times higher in known cases. Melbourne is also outpacing the city of Palm Bay almost 2 to 1, as Palm Bay is at 17. Palm Bay is larger geographically as well as in population. The difference, I believe, is in the messaging. Our message to the public, as well as Palm Bay's, and will continue to, the message is to stay at home. Although exercise and fishing are exampled in the essential activities by the governor's order, nothing in the governor's order spells out that activity be done at a public beach or on a private boat. The messaging I am seeing from locations with higher than average numbers is going to the beach, go boating, go golfing, etc., as business as usual. I, as well as others, are continuing to take heed the advice from the White House, the Centers for Disease Control, and the National Institute of Health. Current recommendations from the National Institute of Health are to stay at home for the next 2 weeks and, if all possible, not to travel to grocery stores or pharmacies. This recommendation came within the last 48 hours. I am passing on to our citizens the recommendations by the subject matter experts. This messaging can be attributed to our lower numbers of confirmed cases. Our president and vice president stand by these experts. I suggest that unless you have a subject matter expert that is willing to give you an alternative solution to the pandemic, that you stand with the president and his staff and support their approach to flatten the curve and reduce the COVID-19 exposure. Please also consider the recommendations of the local subject matter experts, Ms. Stahl, and members of the healthcare industry, which all have reached out to you, with my understanding. Their recommendation is to close the public beaches. I mentioned public beaches as a current legal matter involving private beach access in federal court at this time. I believe up in Fort Walton Beach. I believe your city or your county attorney is aware of this. This was passed on to me. Currently, with the parking closed, there are vehicles parking alongside the road on South A1A. I was getting reports of this. People were calling me, creating a substantial risk to those entering or exiting roadside parking for public beach access. So basically, when you close it off the public beach access, all that people are doing is parking alongside the roads, and that's creating a hazard. They're going to be getting in and out of traffic from those parking spots alongside the road. So really, it kind of defeated the purpose. Also, I want to bring up, Commissioner Lober advised earlier today that the COVID-19 patient who died in the last 24 hours did not appear as a positive case until April 3rd and had been at the hospital for 10 days before her results had come back. This is a problem, as we do not know how many people are hospitalized that are waiting a test until their death or a test result comes back. We need a number of presumptive cases in our hospitals that are waiting a test so we may determine in real time how many other potential cases are really out there. My last point is the potential exposure to first responders. I've been receiving information that multiple first responders in the county have been tested positive for COVID-19 and others are waiting test results. I wrote this before this news release came out with the Titusville. I've handed out or provided to you 2 documents. They're Facebook social media pages, one from the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office and the other from the Brevard County Sheriff's Office. Both departments have sworn deputies that have lost sworn deputies to the COVID-19 in the last week. The picture displayed on the screen up there is an actual official posting by the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. That is a deputy that they lost as a result of that in the hospital. It's staff at Kennedy Hospital located in West Palm Beach. That was
Want me
just
to go to
taken
the
a
next
couple
one,
days
sir?
ago. Go to the next one, please. This will be the second gentleman that lost his life. He's with the Broward County Sheriff's Office, Shannon Bennett. Currently, they have 22 deputies, that's what's been reported, 22 deputies tested positive for COVID-19. These are 2 individuals. One of them had a pre-existing condition, the other one did not, and both of them have passed away from the COVID-19.
It looks like this deputy was in his 30s as well.
Yes, exactly. Okay, I must ask you to do everything you can to protect those who cannot stay at home and must go in harm's way on a daily basis. Currently, this would include reducing the unnecessary risk to exposure of the disease. Public areas such as boat ramps, beaches, or other parks currently require enforcement of the governor's order under Section 252 of the Florida statute. The language of the statute provides that law enforcement shall enforce applicable orders. This requires them to engage more with the public and therefore exposing themselves to increased risk of infection. Please consider the risk of them when deciding what is absolutely necessary for the public good. Those photographs I provide are a grim reminder of the prices being paid, not just here in Florida, but across the nation. And that's all I want to present. Any questions?
Yes, sir. Deputy Mayor, may I ask you, with respect to limiting, whether it's 5 per 1,000 square foot or otherwise, the number of individuals concentrated in a given area, do you know how they stage folks outside? Because my concern is if we were to do something like that, which I'm open to looking at doing, and I would probably be inclined, if this question we had some good answer to, if we're stacking them outside and keeping them together so that they can disperse inside, it seems almost counterproductive. How are they generally handling that, to your knowledge?
The way we're handling it is we're stacking out with the cart in between each customer. So basically, they're stacked in single file. They have a cart in front of them and employees out there making sure that they're stacked out there properly.
Help my ignorance here. I truly don't know. Is the average cart, what, about 4 feet, 4.5 feet?
Probably, yeah.
So
it's not
closer.
quite 6 feet, but
Okay.
they're probably not bumper to bumper, basically, but
Sure.
they're far enough away that it's keeping the 6 feet.
Yeah, I don't know what my colleagues think about that, but I certainly would be open if someone wanted to make a motion at any point during the meeting to restricting it, whether 5 is the correct number or some other number, whether it be higher or otherwise. I certainly would be open to considering that. The beach situation, we'll see what the commission wants to do with it. But I appreciate it, sir.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, we've got 2 sets of resolutions here, one from District 5 for the benefit of everyone's hearing here, since the audio over the phone isn't perfect. I've asked Commissioner Tabaya to read Commissioner Risnardi's resolution recognizing April 2020 as Child Abuse Prevention Month. And before I have him read that, I do want to point out that staff has brought up to the dais here, what's the term for these, Commissioner Pritchett? Do you know what these are called? Pinwheels? Thank you. Pinwheels. Okay, so we have a slew of pinwheels, and I think the idea was to have each of us holding the pinwheel, but maybe it's best to wait until we have all 5 of us at some point in time. So I'll ask staff to hold on to this, and then when we're a little bit further in this coronavirus pandemic, when we're on the upmend and we actually have everyone here, we'll certainly be happy to do that. But Commissioner Tabaya, if you would, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Risnardi. Whereas Florida's future depends on nurturing and healthy development of our children, and whereas the abuse and neglect of children can cause severe, costly, and lifelong problems, and whereas every child has the right to be safe, healthy, and happy childhood where they are educationally and developmentally on track, and whereas research shows that parents and caregivers who have support systems and know how to seek help in times of trouble are more resilient and better able to provide safe environments and nurturing experiences for their children, and whereas individuals, businesses, schools, and faith-based and community organizations must make children a top priority and take action to support their physical, social, emotional, educational development for all children, and whereas the blue and silver pinwheel stand as a symbol of health and happiness, all children deserve. And whereas during the month of April, Prevent Child Abuse Florida, in collaboration with the Florida Department of Children and Family and the Children Abuse Prevention Task Force of Brevard, will implement Pinwheels for Prevention, a statewide campaign promoting awareness of healthy children, healthy child development, and positive parenting practices, and the types of concrete support families need within their communities. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, does hereby proclaim the month of April 2020 as Child Abuse Prevention Month, and urges all Floridians to engage in activities whose purpose is to strengthen families and communities to provide the optimal environment for healthy children, healthy child development, done, ordered, and adopted, regular session, 7th day of April, 2020.
May I have a motion, please? All right, motion from Commissioner Pritchett. I'll go ahead and second it. All in favor of adopting that, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
All right, I know that Ian Golden has the actual resolution that's framed in the other building. I don't know if we have anyone here to receive it that would like to address the commission.
Yes, my name is Phoebe Whalen. I'm with Children's Home Society. I'm the Regional Executive Director and here representing the Child Abuse Prevention Task Force of Brevard.
Welcome.
Thank you, Commissioners. As we socially distance to lower risk for the health of our nation, the risk to our children cannot be lower. Families already struggling with isolation, with mental health disorders, with demons of their past, and so much more are now also finding themselves hit with unemployment, mounting anxiety, and overwhelming stress that accompanies it, and the reality of having their children home every minute, every day. The public health crisis we're all battling is difficult enough for those of us fortunate to have a strong support system. But for the families already teetering on the brink of crisis, social isolation coupled with fear of uncertainty could be a dangerous combination that puts them over the edge and propels children into chaos. It's sadly ironic that the isolation is escalating just as our nation commemorates Child Abuse Prevention Month, a time for us to all reflect our collective responsibility to local children and to be alert to the dangers that may be hidden behind closed doors. With schools and daycares closed, fewer eyes are on our children. That responsibility is more important now than ever before. But the more significant threat to our children is what we at Children's Home Society of Florida and other members of our Child Abuse Prevention Task Force like Brevard Cares fight every day. That's neglect. 75% of children in foster care have been removed from their families because of neglect, which are often very fixable family issues. We can intervene early enough if we can get the right services and strategies in place, both of which are threatened right now. Loss of income, perceived loss of access to resources, and stigma, still too often associated with seeking support, can lead to very preventable issues that cause thousands of children to enter foster care every year. Inadequate food or housing, untreated mental health challenges, and inadequate parental supervision, for instance. Though we're socially distant, help is still available. If families are overwhelmed with the pressure and stress brought about by COVID-19 and its challenges, please reach out. Brevard Cares, Children's Home Society of Florida, and other members agencies of our community connect you with and our families with online counseling, online parenting support, local resources for food and rent assistance, and much more. If you see a neighbor who is overwhelmed, let them know that they're not alone. Hope and help is just a phone call or a click away. And if you see a child who may be in danger, please do not hesitate to report your concerns. Now more than ever, we must come together and not just for our nation, but also for the safety and well-being of our most vulnerable children. And we provided the pinwheels. Typically during the month of April, we're planting pinwheels throughout our community to show the happy, healthy children and the foundation of what our children deserve. Because of social distancing and our stay-in-place order, we're asking our members and our communities to post photos of themselves with the pinwheels. recognition of Child Abuse Prevention Month. So we hope our commissioners will send us some folks, some pictures, so that we can post and share along with you. So thank you again for your support.
Thank you so much. I appreciate everything you do for the kids. All right, next up, we've got a resolution from my office. I'll go ahead and start. Whereas Aging Matters in Brevard, formerly known as the Community Services Council of Brevard, was incorporated as a nonprofit organization in 1965 to promote the general welfare of Brevard County through coordinated community services and beneficial programs for both public and private agencies. And whereas Volunteers for Meals on Wheels programs in Brevard County, Florida, not only deliver nutritious meals to seniors who are at significant risk of hunger and isolation, but also demonstrate caring, concern, and attention to their welfare. And whereas in 2019, the Brevard Senior Nutrition Programs in Brevard County, Florida, delivered 167,347 nutritious meals to 1,354 homebound seniors throughout the county and helped them maintain their health and independence. And whereas 162 Seniors at Lunch volunteers donated 12,379 hours of service at 12 group dining sites, encouraging community, activity, and healthy nutrition in order to combat the growing problem of senior isolation and depression. And whereas also in 2019, 516 volunteers aged 55 and older provided 57,059 hours of service, helping to support 14 nonprofit and governmental agencies focused on healthy futures, education, veteran and military families, economic opportunity, and capacity building. And whereas Senior TransServe and Vets Driving Vets volunteers provided needed transportation to local veterans for visits to medical appointments, hospitals, pharmacies, and grocery stores. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, does hereby unanimously proclaim April 2020 as Aging Matters in Brevard Volunteer Appreciation Month and urges every citizen to participate in a volunteer program in order to create a culture of community based on senior care throughout Brevard. May I have a motion? All right, thank you, Commissioner Pritchett. I'll second it. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? All right, passes unanimously. And I do believe we have someone over in Building B to receive the framed resolution. Ian? Yeah. Oh, there you are. Thank you. You've got the floor, sir.
Hello, Commissioner Lober. My name's Josh Jensen. I'm the president and CEO of Aging Matters in Brevard. And I want to say thank you to the County Commission, thank you to the Brevard Commission on Aging for your support. We're still continuing to provide Meals on Wheels on a daily basis to nearly all of our clients, and our volunteers are absolutely vital. I want to take every chance I can get to thank and appreciate them. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you coming out. I know the work that you've done is, and continue to do, I should say, is vital. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to work with you all some months ago, and I'd like to, when things become a little bit easier in the schedule, get back to doing that with you guys.
Absolutely, we would love it.
Thank you, sir. Take care.
Thank you.
All right, consent. I'd like F1 to be pulled. Would anyone else like anything, Commissioner Tobias? F1, okay. Well, we'll let it be you pulling it, so I'll withdraw my pull and we'll count it as your pull. How's that? All right, anything else? Commissioner Isnardi or Smith? All right, I do want to make one very quick comment with respect to F5. I don't want it pulled, but I did want to indicate with F5 that the dollar value is something that I'm working with utilities on to see if we have some ability to either get grant money or to otherwise reduce that, because charging folks the better part of $4,000 to connect to a sewer, especially with what we're dealing with now, I don't know that that's something that a lot of people can afford. So, with that said, I'm not going to pull it because I don't think we're at the phase where we're voting on the actual dollar value. But at the future, when this is brought back for other items pertaining to it, hopefully that number will be substantially lower. So could I have a motion to pass consent less F1?
Second.
I have a motion from Commissioner Pritchett, second from Commissioner Tobias. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
All right, we passed consent less F1 unanimously. Virginia, you've got the floor.
Okay. F1 is a memorandum of agreement between East Coast Zoo and Brevard County for our countywide oyster gardening program. This it was launched by the County Commission in October 2013 in response to the super bloom and the unusual mortality event. We actually held a County Commission meeting down at the Marine Resources Council Lagoon House, and there were a number of actions that the board took that day, including launching this program. Through this program, over 1,400 waterfront property owners have been trained as citizen scientists and given the tools to produce hundreds of thousands of robust oysters annually. Those oysters are then collected from the gardeners and deployed just before they're ready to spawn as a live top reef layer added to oyster reefs that are now being constructed with funding from the Save Our Indian River Lagoon Plan. These oyster reefs filter and clarify lagoon water, reduce erosion, provide habitat, and remove nitrogen. So this would just renew that contract with the zoo for another year.
Yeah, I've got a couple questions with respect to this, and then I'll turn it over to Commissioner Tobias unless he'd like to go first. Okay, so I've got two concerns with respect to this, and it's not that I'm unwilling to approve it. I just really would like a little better clarity on a couple things. So first, do we have numbers over the course of time that this has been in place for the percentage of these that survive, or the raw numbers that survive versus die?
I have numbers for how the reefs have been doing the last few years. So we started with a number of pilot reefs. We had a lot to learn. So starting with our first really successful reef in 2017, that's Geiger. We start with 25 live oysters in each bag on the top of these reefs. That reef, which has been in the water for just over 2 years now has or averages 49.73 oysters. So it's doubled from 25 to 50 live oysters per bag. Also in the Central Lagoon, a more recent reef, Riverview Senior Center, that one was installed in June of 2018, and it now averages 180 oysters per bag after starting with 25 per bag. In the Banana River, we have one site deployed in August of 2018 that is about a year and a half old now. The density there is 81 oysters per bag. Marina Isles in the Banana River deployed just June of 2019, so it's a little over, I guess, about 9 months old. That one is now at 67 oysters per bag. We have one site in the northern Indian River Lagoon. The further north we go, the harder it is for oysters to do well. So that site was deployed in June of 2018. It is down from 25 to 18 oysters per bag. We understand that, as we move north, we're probably going to have to work harder. We may have to add oysters a number of times before we get enough of a natural supply for these things to take off. We also have 2 sites in canals. We wanted to see if this would work in canals. One of those sites is now at 23 oysters per bag. One of those sites is at 11 oysters per bag. So the further away from the lagoon we go up into the canal, it looks like oysters are not doing as well, but closer to the lagoon, they are surviving.
A couple other questions, if I may. So I'm trying to figure out an objective way of determining whether this is a good use of the funds. First, regardless of where the funds come from, do we have a number in terms of total pounds, dollars per pound total nitrogen removed for this?
Our estimate has been about $400 per pound of nitrogen removed.
And then my last question before I turn it over to Commissioner Tobias, then Commissioner Pritchett, is with respect to this, I see that the fiscal impact is listed as coming out of one of the stormwater funds. Given that we've had such fluidity over the Sorrel funds in that issue, do you think that this might be something that would be appropriate to seek Sorrel funding for, especially given that the oysters, from what I'm seeing in the staff report and from what you've mentioned, at least in large part go toward Sorrel projects?
So when the half-cent sales tax was proposed, there was a lot of discussion about how those dollars would be used. And the intent was established through a guidance document approved by the county commission that said that the referendum funds are for additional projects critical to lagoon restoration or to accelerate the implementation of projects that are not yet fully funded. And where it was a bit unclear, where there was maybe a reimbursement or an allocation that was going to take place for a project that was partially funded from another source, there was an out clause that any dollars that were saved in a program, whether at a county or city or a private entity, that those dollars be pledged to go back into some sort of restoration project for the Indian River Lagoon. So in this case, the gardening funding is coming out of stormwater funds that are going to water quality projects anyway. So if they save the money, then it's definitely going to meet this part of the intent, that it would go to other lagoon projects. The next step is how to fund it. And so, as you're aware, we have a contingency fund reserve in the lagoon plan, and the purpose of that reserve is to cover reasonable shortfalls. So if the board were to say that, there was a shortfall that meant that the stormwater funds were not available, then cost increases that amount to more than 10% of the estimated cost of a project, which this would, will be evaluated by staff, looking at the circumstances and the findings, and make a recommendation to the Citizens Oversight Committee, and then the committee would make a recommendation to the county commission.
I appreciate it. Just my last thought with respect to this. I appreciate the concern with the reserve. I share your concern with the reserve. In suggesting that Sorrel may be a more appropriate source of funding for this than the Stormwater Fund, what I'm specifically looking at is the roughly $7 million or so unallocated portion of Sorrel. I don't have the exact figure in front of me, but I would never promote taking it out of the reserve. So as far as any contention to the contrary, I just want to clear that up. But yeah, I appreciate this. I think it's an interesting idea. In terms of where you deploy it, I don't have the level of expertise that you do. If they're dying in one area and they're thriving in another, obviously it seems that is factored in the equation. I support the idea. I just don't support the sourcing of it. So I'm in all likelihood going to be voting against this today. Commissioner Tabaya.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think you've done a very good job touching the heart of this. Just to, this is our first time as a board to deal with a budget that is going to be strained. I think we all know stormwater fees, while there are fees from businesses, unfortunately, I think there's going to be a number of businesses that don't weather this storm. And this was money that we got from a state grant, and that state grant is no longer there. I appreciate the work that Sorrel is doing, Virginia, to empirically put data behind the decisions that you make, and clearly you've done a great job with the Sorrel program. One of my questions to Virginia was, well, let's go source oysters from somewhere else. And she knew the research that oysters from this coast don't meet standards from another coast. Either way, I think while I support, I don't know if it was a motion, but the idea that we don't go forward with this, I certainly would like to give the Sorrel Oversight Committee the ability to run this $150,000 through their plan to see if that $400 or $600 meets that plan, and maybe they can incorporate it into not only that unallocated funds, but maybe this would be a reoccurring source. So my motion would be to decline to enter into the MOA and allocate of the allocated storm funds, and give authority Sorrel to consider this expenditure as part of their plan.
I'll second it for discussion. Commissioner Pritchett.
I think that's exactly what I was going to request also. I love the oyster project, and I was actually going to mention I think our budget's going to drastically change And I'm sorry, because you've spent so much time with all that, but I think you have a lot of work to do in the next, probably next year, trying to rearrange a lot of things. So you're the person to do it. You know, you're pretty amazing, but I think this is probably a project you guys will like. So I agree. I would like to send this back to the COC and let them come up with a recommendation of what they want to do. Commissioner Lober, I'm not sure they're going to still have that $6 million after a couple months. So
We'll see.
yeah.
Although the cost
I
to
usually
get
have a
things-
lot of faith, but I'm not sure where I am on that one. So
Truth be told, the cost to get some things done probably is going to fall drastically, and the cost to get other things done is probably going to rise exponentially. How it evens out, though, remains to be seen.
right, but you know the value of the dollar is about to way down.
For all
so
of us.
it's going to be very interesting days. But I'm glad we got you because I think you'll do a great job trying to figure it out.
Hopefully some infrastructure grants might help replace.
That'd be wonderful.
Go Blue Devils. All right, Commissioner Isnardi, do you have anything?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly
I like
with you
that.
guys and that going back to the Sorrel.
Perfect. Commissioner Smith, anything, sir? All right, sounds like he's not objecting. Virginia?
May I just clarify,
Yes.
the motion was to give authority to the Swirl COC to accept funding that project. Would that need to come back to the board, or if they said yes, are we good to proceed?
If you guys are okay with it, unless there's a legal requirement that we have it come back again, I'm happy just to okay it if that's what they're willing to do. I agree. All right, so the motion contemplates that. My second stands. All right, so all in favor of that, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to let you know that I had difficulty in unmuting my phone. That's why I didn't reply to your question.
You think it's operator error, sir? I'm just teasing
Anything's
you.
possible.
I'm just teasing you. I apologize.
You might
All right.
need Linda to help you with that.
You need to find a 10-year-old over there that knows all the techie stuff. All right, that passed unanimously. Thank you. Appreciate it, Virginia. All right, moving right along. We got through consent. Public comment? One? All right, we've got one in public comment. We saved the best for first and last. So if you wouldn't mind, just start up by telling us your name and the city that you reside in, if you would, please.
Okay, Pete Conisal, I live in Viera.
You got the
Okay,
floor.
and I live within Viera IRCC, but it's only me that I represent. Okay, based on covering three things, IRCC needs a right-hand turn lane off of eastbound Sierra Boulevard onto Independence Avenue into their back gate entrance. There's only a matter of time, not if a rear-end collision occurs. Also, pedestrians, bicyclists, and golf carts travel the sidewalks, which are not visible from the road until you are right on the turn, and they do not stop for cars. That leaves the residents with the fear of hitting someone. The short entryway before the gate is another reason that the cars making the turn have to turn slow down below 10 miles per hour, sometimes stop on Viera Boulevard before making the turn into IRCC. The second item is a pathway over I-95 along Viera Boulevard is needed to accommodate golf carts in order for the residents of East Viera to have access to the businesses on the west side of I-95. The elderly who no longer drive cars and the school children would be able to take their golf carts or bicycle to school now lack a legal pathway to accommodate the sizable walkers, and which existed prior to the new exit created on Viera Boulevard off of I-95. The other item basically is IRCC, Heron's Landing, and the Faith Viera Lutheran Church could use a traffic light on the corner where Heron's Landing and IRC exit onto Viera Boulevard. There is a parallel road from Faith Viera Lutheran Church along Heron's Landing leading into the Heron's Landing exit, making it usable, especially for left-hand turns. So that basically covers them all. And the main thing when you're talking about the golf carts is that if you look in the parking lot of any one of the schools, you'll see 9 million golf carts. Thank you.
I appreciate it, sir. Thank you. Jim, that's it? That's it for public comment? Okay, I understand that's it for public comment. We're going to move on to item H1, public hearing on the extension or proposed extension to the temporary moratorium on new applications of biosolids to lands within Brevard County. And Virginia, before you go through the whole spiel, I don't know where everyone else is. I'm happy extending it for 180 days. Where's everyone else?
I'd like to make a motion to extend it for 180 days.
I'll second the motion from Commissioner Pritchett to extend it 180 days. Any discussion on the motion? Commissioner Tabaya, Commissioner Isnardi, anything?
There's no one here to speak on this item?
And there's no one here to speak on the item. Commissioner Isnardi? Smith?
I'm good.
It's the little one that looks like a microphone, Commissioner Smith.
No, I didn't hear you ask my
No, I
opinion.
apologize, sir.
I'm hearing silence.
No, I'm just making sure
Okay.
there's no discussion or concern.
Someone second it?
Yeah, we have it moved and seconded at this point. So what we're voting on is to extend the existing moratorium by 180 days. All right, seeing that I think we've exhausted all discussion, all in favor of extending the moratorium by another 180 days, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Perfect. See, that was even easier than the last one, Virginia. All right, let's see how we do on H2. This is approval of the third quarter supplemental budget for fiscal year 1920. I did have some concerns that staff was able to address, so I'm not going to bring each and every one of those up, but if anyone has discussion, I'm happy to have it. Otherwise, if someone wants to make a motion, I'm good with it.
Make a motion to approve it.
All right, I will second Commissioner Pritchett's motion. Any concerns, speak now or forever hold your peace. All right, I'm going to call the question. All in favor of approving H2, which is the third quarter supplemental budget for fiscal year 19 to 20, say aye. Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Passes unanimously. All right, this is a fun one, and I'm actually happy. I hope this thing goes through today. I-1, which was Commissioner Tabaya's comeback here from staff on the small business relief, potential mitigating measures for Brevard County. I'll just tell you, I like all of it. Commissioner Tabaya, you've got the floor.
Thank you. First of all, I wish I would have figured out running for the county commission when I was in high school, because I came up with an idea and staff turned around a 3-page document with better ideas in such a short period of time. So and told me things I could do, things I couldn't. I want to greatly appreciate staff going above and beyond in these trying times to help out the small businesses there. I agree with Commissioner Lober. I think all the ideas listed here are great. That would be option 3, both options 1 and 2. So
Sounds like a motion?
I'd make a motion to accept option 3.
I'll second that motion. Any further discussion? All in favor of pursuing option 3, which is trace, or trois en français, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, passes unanimously. Wonderful. We are really moving along today. New business, I don't see anything here. Add-ons, there are no add-ons. Jim, nothing? Perfect. Public comment, I guess we don't have anyone else up there that you're aware of? All right, the answer is in the negative. Board reports. Mr. Abate, do we have you on, sir?
He's got 2.
Yes, we do, and I do have 2 items. The first item deals with our utility department. The Florida Department of Environmental Protection has a new process that they're utilizing for consent orders that require the CEO of the organization to execute consent orders and settlement agreements that deal with any kind of spill that happens with our utility wastewater department. Eddie Consonin is available to discuss the one that we have that we need to execute by April 10th. And what I'm looking for is the board's authority to sign on behalf of the Board of County Commissioners these consent orders when we receive them. So, Eddie, if you want to explain it.
All right, he's coming on down. Say, you're doing way too well for the end of the workday.
Yeah.
You look good.
Thank you. I'm not sure what Frank said prior to this, but I just wanted to inform you, give a little update of what's going on with the FDEP and their policy with regard to illicit discharge sanitary sewer spills. And it's going to tie in a little bit to what I'm going to be sharing. So one of the things Governor DeSantis has been given a mandate with FDEP is stricter guidelines with regard to discharges of any sort, even if it's small in relative size. And in doing so, it used to be past practice where the FDEP would, you could submit paperwork and it was basically, you know, we get it, don't do it again. Now the order is where the FDEP is given a consent order on every single one. So, for example, we had an illicit discharge due to an air relief valve, which is tied in with what I'm going to talk about. And there's a formula associated in how they come up with the fees. In past practice, it used to be where the FDEP would acknowledge it, understand that it was an unforeseen condition. Regardless of the circumstance, now they're given consent orders where there's a fee associated with it. So we received one for an issue occurred in January, and this one, based on their formula, is $3,533. And so this is going to be the practice. The other thing that the FDEP is working out is that any entity that has more than 3 discharges in a year will be on an automatic 5-year probation. So the likelihood is, I think not only us, but most or every other utility will constantly be on a 5-year probation, which means at that point that every instance they have, they will be getting some form of a consent order. So I wanted to share that with you, update you on this event. The other thing, and if I guess if this could be direction, is if in future consent orders, is it the wish of the commission where these come before you, or if we can give the authority of the county manager to sign off on these?
My thought, and I don't know where you all are at with it, is I don't mind giving the county manager authority to sign at least up to a certain level, but I definitely want to know when this is happening, and I think that this is important enough to the public that it should be brought up to the commission. Certainly anything over a trivial amount. I don't know, where the right number is, if it's 0 or if it's, 5,000 or 50,000, but, I think this is something that the public in particular is concerned about. And obviously you've inherited the system that you've inherited, which is better than some and worse than others. But I think it's important for folks to know what's going on, regardless of what the original cause is, regardless of how we're addressing it. Commissioner Pritchett?
Yeah, I'm probably good if I'm going to call him Frank, county manager, does that. I don't think this means you're going to have any more than you have had. It's just a different process. So maybe, Mr. Abate, if you would, maybe like monthly or bi-monthly, you just kind of let us know what's going on if it's anything abnormal. But you just need him to sign.
If you want to let me use, if the board is good with it and leave it at the authority that I currently have, and then what I will do is every one of the consent orders, I will, either myself or the utilities department will advise the board of the specific order, when the spill occurred and what the amount was. So if that's good with the board, we'll proceed that way.
I thought you'd do that. Thank you.
I appreciate that. That's good. All right, so with respect to that, Frank, since you have authority up to 100,000, I don't know that you need a motion as long as the board's clear that they're okay with that. Is that all right with you, sir, or do you really prefer to have a motion?
A motion would be good because it's a consent order.
All right, so may I have a motion?
Yeah, that way. Yes, thank you.
May I have a motion to authorize Frank Abate or his designee to sign on consent orders with relation to the topic that was just discussed? All right, motion from Commissioner Tavaya.
Did you say motion or second? Just kidding.
Sounded like motion. You want to second his?
No, that's fine. I second it.
All right, Commissioner Pritchett seconds Commissioner Tavaya's motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eddie.
Okay.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you. I
Ms.
have
Bentley.
one last item, Commissioners.
Oh, I apologize,
and
sir.
this deals with the status of advisory boards. And Mr. Denny Hoff has been working with TAD from Planning and Development, trying to do everything we reasonably could to continue with the advisory board meeting, but he does have an update and wants to advise the board of where we are currently.
Good evening, Commissioners. We had a P&Z advisory board meeting yesterday afternoon. It went well, certainly well enough to take care of all the items that were there. However, we did run into several different challenges, which now call into question if we should move forward with more advisory board meetings. And so at this point, we're recommending that we do not do that. The reasons essentially come down to concerns over due process issues for both applicants as well as the public. And in addition to that, we have some technological issues that we're trying to work out, and we're hoping that we can deal with them between now and when we would hopefully be able to pick up with meetings again in July. Currently, what we would really do is schedule meetings that would be taking place in June, and then they would fold into either and this would be an option for the board, either a July 9th zoning meeting that we would have with the Board of County Commissioners, and other meetings would precede that, or as a second option, we just go to our next regularly scheduled zoning meeting. And so with that, there's a number of meetings that would be delayed or canceled, and then the items would all be rescheduled to subsequent meetings. And so there's a North Merritt Island Advisory Board meeting. It is Thursday, the 9th, and then LPA meeting, a Board of Adjustment meeting, Planning and Zoning Board meeting on that one would be on May 4th, and then another North Merritt Island meeting on May 14th. There's only one item scheduled on that one, and then finally the last Board of Adjustment meeting. So those would be the ones that would be delayed or canceled, as it were, and then under our first option, we'd schedule a North Merritt Island meeting to be on June 11th. There'd be 3 items on that, and then P&Z and LPA meeting combined, which would have 9 items on it. And then on July 9th would be the sort of new Board of County Commissioners zoning meeting, which would have 11 items on it. Thereafter, we would be all on regularly scheduled meetings, including the Board of Adjustments. There is a second option, which I can go into if you'd like, which would eliminate the July 9th additional meeting. And it would just go straight to all of our regularly scheduled meetings.
Yeah, Mr. Denninghoff, if someone wants to hear it, I'm happy to have you go over that, but I can tell you I'd prefer not to go that route. Would anyone like to hear that other option? Mr. Tabaya?
Thank you. Mr. Denninghoff, are you concerned, obviously this is a long delay, are you concerned if any of those advisory boards don't have quorum, if this will push it back I know one of them has the ability to push it back a better part of 1 month. Are you concerned if that happens?
Well, of course, if we don't have a quorum, we would have that'd be a significant problem. Currently, we are having a very willing participation on the part of the board members, for both North Merritt Island as well as P&Z and LPA and the Board of Adjustments. They're pretty dedicated folks, so they seem to be very committed to getting the work done. So I'm not too concerned that we won't have a quorum at this stage, of course, but we don't, of course, know what's going to be going on with the pandemic. So I would just have to add that, we'll have to continue to monitor that. We're hoping that based on the math models that have been produced, which there's a lot of them now for the pandemic, for Brevard County or for Florida, we're thinking that we'll be on the recovery side of things or well into it by the time any of these meetings would be happening. Of course, if we're not, then we may have to reevaluate.
Mr. Denninghoff, just a question for you. I've had the position with a lot of folks reaching out that if we have some issue with respect to maintaining the guidelines by either the CDC or FDOH, that I would be in support of, or at least that I would recommend cancellation of the advisory boards. Is that a concern at all as far as maintaining the CDC and the FDOH recommendations? Because that, to me, would certainly clinch it.
It is. It's part of the challenge for the due process. There's technological challenges with how we have to do that in order to maintain social distancing and the opportunity for the applicant
yes, sir.
to be able to question public comments and be able to, in a timely and reasonable way, deal with those issues, and then cycling any public comment or anybody from the public who back into the room,
okay,
and to answer questions or from the applicant, and so that presents a pretty serious issue for us. There's also a concern with the technological approach as to whether or not there's a proper or appropriate opportunity to make patients.
I apologize for interjecting. I think you may have won the argument, though. So there's really not much of a point. I think you may have everyone on your side with this already. How would you like the motion phrased specifically, since it's something that we're doing at your behest?
I think we would like to have a motion, and might look to Ms. Bentley for some help with this, but I think a motion that would can't effectively cancel the April, let me get this right here, the April 9th North Merritt Island Advisory Board meeting, the April 20th Local Planning Agency meeting, April 22nd Board of Adjustments meeting, and then the May 4th Planning and Zoning Board meeting, and May 14th North Merritt Island Advisory Board meeting, and then the May 20th Board of Adjustment meeting. And then to schedule a June 11th North Merritt Island Advisory Board meeting, June 15th NZ and LPA meeting, and a July 9th Board of County Commissioners zoning meeting. All other board meetings that would be affected or could be involved are already scheduled, and so they wouldn't. No motion would be needed for any of those.
All right, Commissioner Pritchett made the motion, which I'm seconding, as stated by you, Mr. Denninghoff. Any discussion on the motion before we call it? All in favor of the motion as stated, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Sounds like that one's in favor. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. All right, anything further, either Mr. Denninghoff or Mr. Abate?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Ms. Bentley?
No report.
Commissioner Pritchett? Commissioner Tabaya?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we're on a roll for unanimous, so hopefully this follows. I'm going to be asking for a request of the board to the policy board. Let me tell you the genesis of this. I checked into a hotel. I got an email, whether this was generated from the county or the hotel. It's irrelevant. It says it's question and answers. Are there any exceptions to providing a letter? The answer is no. So the order, and again, this came before the board, and I think there might have been a bit of an oversight on this. It would require either an employer or doctor's note, according to what came out of the policy group. Unfortunately, right now, we're seeing an increase or hearing about an increase of domestic violence. And victims of domestic violence shouldn't need a letter. And I imagine getting a letter, a victim of a domestic violence, it would be awkward to get a letter from either an employer or a doctor stating that. And it's not just that situation. Another one would be a caretaker who decides to isolate from the folks that he or she is taking care of, would then need a note from either their employer or their doctor or the doctor of the people that they're taking care of. So I'm going to request that the policy board revisit the requirements contained in its limitations on tourism and lodging in order to allow for self-certification that they are staying in a hotel in accordance with guidelines issued by the Florida Health Department and Executive Order 2091 and are not engaged in leisure tourism. So this, in effect, would allow them to self-certify instead of providing a note. As we know, the healthcare, unfortunately, practitioners are going to be bogged down. That's only going to get worse. I imagine getting doctor's notes is going to be even more traumatic. So the motion just would be to recommend that to the policy group.
Well, so before you formally make the motion, I was just going to say I think it may be moot at this point, and let me explain why. I've been working with Ms. Bentley since Thursday or Friday of last week on a sheet for the hotels to have that would list exceptions to it, and one of the exceptions that we specifically included was in there was that someone's self-certifying as a victim of domestic violence. So essentially, we're not going to require them to produce something, but simply to check a box and say that that's the case. But if you could give us a few days to work on it.
The order is very specific. We need to amend the order to get to the point where they can self-certify. You need to amend the order because it says letter or note.
Right, but what I'm thinking is before we amend the order, I'd like to make sure that we have the form that we're recommending that we're going to send out to the hoteliers in order so that we can have the order consistent with how that form is going to appear. So if you could give us a couple days, I'd prefer not to call the policy group today. If we're ready tomorrow, I can do it tomorrow, but it may be a couple days.
I think you need a little clarification. I think Commissioner Tabaya is discussing self-certification so that you wouldn't need a specific list of activities that would be permitted. And you're talking about a checklist format.
Yes.
So there's a difference there, a significant difference there. One would be, I swear I am not a tourist, and I'm following the FDOH guidelines and the CDC guidelines and the executive order. Yours would be a list of basically approved lodgers.
One would put the onus on the business, one would put the onus on the individual.
Correct.
I think it's very important during these times. And Ms. Bentley did a draft of this. I'm sure she wants to work on it more because she was, I just put this in at the last second, seeing this oversight. But I think she put down under, was it perjury? What was that last bit that got added in there?
So we have found a section in Chapter 92 for self-certification. And if you do not tell the truth in your self-certification, it is considered perjury. And that is a third-degree felony, which would be 5 years in jail or a fine of $5,000.
Actually, technically DOC, not jail. It's okay, though. I'll let it slide this once. All right. The bottom line with it, give me just a day or two. If you want to make the motion, you can make the motion. I'm going to vote against it just because I'm not ready to do that at this point. I would like to finish what we're working on with the form so that I can have at least that available to the policy group to show them this is one alternative. The other alternative is what's suggested by Commissioner Tabaya. And I can tell you I've spoken with at least 2 hoteliers about the form. Actually, one of the hoteliers provided me the form that they got from a colleague of theirs in another state that had at least a similarly, if not more restrictive measure in place. But if you want to make the motion, make the motion.
So here's my thought. As a business, I'm not a business owner, but if the onus, I imagine the business owner would rather have the onus on the individual and not the liability on the business themselves. Right? We've already. I agree. We've already really hamstringed these folks. I think that anything that we can do to take strain off. The hotelier that I'm staying in tonight talked about a $500 fine and 60 days in jail, and all. So they're getting the message. However, I think that I know he had some Delta flight crews come in, and he said it was difficult for many of these flight crews to get a letter from their boss because they were deciding whether or not it was the the pilot, the person in charge of it. It was just a very complicated scenario. This would take that complication out of it, and it sounds like, and I did not know this until Ms. Bentley just would actually make the violation more stringent and the penalty harsher if we did this. So it would take it away from the business, put it on the individual, and I think it would clear up a lot of the issues here. I really don't want to wait, unfortunately. You know, domestic violence, unfortunately, we're going to see a spike in this, so I certainly don't.
I've already communicated with the sheriff about the DV concern.
Motion.
I'm not even sure what the motion is at this point because we've had so much discussion.
Okay, I'll repeat it. Request the policy board revisit the requirements contained in the limitations on tourism and lodging, order to allow for self-certifications that are staying in a hotel in accordance with guidelines issued by the Florida Health Department and Executive Order 2091 and are not engaging in leisure tourism.
Second.
And just before we call the question on that, I'm kind of struggling to pull this up last minute because I didn't know to expect this today. It wasn't on the agenda. You know, this is, I think, actually a kind of a pet peeve that you had previously about putting things last minute on the agenda, or pardon me, not putting them on and bringing them up in board reports. So that's what we're dealing with at this point. But I'm looking at essentially some of the options that were in here, and the onus would be on the individual to complete this. And the hoteliers I've spoken with have been universally okay with it, and they have a variety of reasons that would indicate why they're staying. Lodging necessary for emergency purposes is one. Lodging necessary to provide essential federal, state, county, or local municipal support. Commercial travel carrying goods resources can no longer safely travel. Advocates or referral from a domestic violence shelter. Lodging necessary due to medical or family medical support. Lodging that's occupied by a local worker employee. They have a slew, and this is what we were working on, and I'm happy to address it, but I don't think we're at a point where I'm going to recommend to the policy group to make the change until we can at least see what the options are to make sure that everything goes smoothly and that what we give to the hoteliers is a suggested template will work with whatever it is that we order. But again, you know, the motion's been made and seconded.
So, Mr. Chair, explain this. You're a hotelier. And I've spoken to hoteliers. By the way, many of these folks have been on the opposite end of the spectrum of me and are telling me that they're having issues with this. So I appreciate those folks picking up the phone and making the call to do that. But so help me here. You've got a victim of domestic violence. She checks into the hotel and she's crying. She's beat up and you ask for her letter from a doctor or her employer. She doesn't have one. According to what we have in place, needing a note or a letter, she can't stay at that hotel. Do you expect her to go back to the dangerous environment in which she came from?
Oh, that's definitely a reasonable suggestion. No, I wouldn't expect that she just checks a box that says referral from a domestic violence shelter. That seems to me to be a pretty obvious answer to it.
But that's not what's in place right now. What was put in place, and I voted against, but what was put in place was a note is required. What you're contemplating right now is not happening right now. There's no checklist. Now, granted, that checklist is better than what is in place right now, but again, it puts the onus on the business, and this puts the onus on the individual. Remember, we're going through a tough time. I disagree.
And even the hoteliers I've spoken with disagree. So, you know, if you've had hotels on a monopoly board, God bless. But the hoteliers I've spoken with, and none have called, not one has called from any district to me. I've not spoken with one that had an issue with this. I think actually they've been thankful because they want some kind of a guideline so that, number one, if police come by, be it BCSO or municipal, they can hand something over without having the guests upset that their information was provided. And this gets them out of that situation entirely. But, you know, again, you do what you will with respect to it. I'm happy to call the question. I see a light, though. Commissioner Pritchett?
I actually think Commissioner Tobias' way is a little bit simpler and less confusing. It's still getting to the same goal, and I think this puts the responsibility on the person checking in that's not allowed to be away from home. We have a safer at home order, and I think this also would help. You know, I just remember when we went through this with the pet stores too, there's just such a liability on businesses trying to figure this out. So I think this puts the pressure on the person that would be breaking the law, because they're not supposed to be doing it anyways. And I like that there is a fine if they do it, and they shouldn't be doing it.
5 years in prison, that's good.
Yeah, for someone who tries to check in that shouldn't,
Mr. Chair.
or whatever it is. But
Yeah.
anyways, it still just shows you have to be responsible checking in. I think it gets to the same purpose. We still sent the message out that Brevard County is not open for tourism or leisure activities. And Commissioner Tobias, you are right. Domestic violence is getting worse. So is child abuse too, and we're not hearing it reported. So it's it gets all the things encompassed that I was
Ms.
thinking
Bentley,
was important.
would you do me a favor and read me the actual motion that passed from the policy group? And not too quickly, if you don't mind.
Order.
The order.
Uh-huh.
Just the whereas, just the operative portion. I don't need the whereas.
Okay, Section 2, to implement the closure effective on April 3rd with the time. All hotels, motels, campgrounds, short-term rental, vacation rentals, and all other transient rentals to include marinas, recreational vehicle parks, and timeshares shall cease renting to tourists for 30 days. This ban shall not apply to rentals or to transitory military personnel, first responders, healthcare workers, construction workers actively engaged in projects in Brevard County, and others working or engaged in formal business in Brevard County. A letter from the lodger's employer indicating the stay is work-related, or a doctor's note justifying the need to shelter in place shall be required by the rental or lodging facility upon arrival at any of the listed facilities. And then it goes on to discuss the sheriff.
Yeah, I don't have a problem amending it. I would like to have something that we can tie in to amend it with.
Mr. Chair, and this is all public record.
Sure.
So I just, I don't think he would mind, but this could be.
Sure.
Tom Hermanson, who is, when we talk about hoteliers, he's one of the big 2 or 3. This is the text I got from him today. Quote, self-certification is the only rational option. Under current circumstances, frontline hotel staff are not trained for the level of interrogation demanded by the order. A lot of GMs are even on property, often older individuals with health concerns. So, you've got a hotelier here advocating for self-certification.
Which is what we've been working on specifically. They pick the box that applies and they self-certify.
I think you're very close, actually. It takes an amendment to the order to get there.
Yeah, and we can do that. I'm happy to do that. But I would like to get in a position with Ms. Bentley on this item that we've been discussing for the past several days.
I'm with you. I'm uncomfortable with boxes. I think that I don't really want to have a woman or a man that has been the victim of abuse have to check a box. Signing an order is one thing, but having to disclose that to a hotel person at the front, I think is problematic. Is another reason why I think just a broad statement that has Florida Health Department and executive order in there.
So essentially, the 5 years DOC and up to $5,000 fine, that's absolutely, completely, and totally impossible to enforce at that point. Here, I'm certifying that I'm not violating the law. I'm not going to say what it is that enables me to stay here, but I promise I'm not a tourist. Wink, wink. That's a better solution. Is it? It's not rhetorical. I'm curious.
I do not want the victims. There's nothing humorous about the victims of domestic violence.
I agree with you.
We have situations that are getting worse in these times. And to put somebody through this, I can't imagine.
To put them through checking a box?
To a stranger in the front of a hotel? Absolutely. I can't even imagine the pain that many of these folks are going through. And I have a list of reports here that talked about this skyrocketing right now. So
we'll call the question. I'm obviously going to advocate the way I advocate with the policy group, but let's call the question at this point. Oh, Commissioner Pritchett, you have something as well?
I was just going to say, this is going to be far from perfect, but the simpler we get it, the better. And so that's why I think it's better to get a little bit more simpler. But, when the sheriff came up here, one of the things we almost went with was not doing this, and he was just going to put out a big marketing campaign we don't want you here. So I don't know how he's going with that, but I think these things we're doing is getting the word out loud and clear. I think the tourism and the leisure activity over here has greatly declined. I don't know how you guys are in your district, but ours is like, there's nobody on the roads or anything, right, Donna? I mean, it is quiet. So I think what we're doing is working. So Commissioner Tobias, on that, I just from working in ministry, that's going on a lot. So I think it's something that to protect our citizens in a safe environment there is okay. Most people aren't going to lie about that, you know.
Well, it's not lying about
So
that.
I know
agree
what
that
you're
most people
saying.
won't,
I know
but-
what you're saying. So I think we're never going to be perfect on this. People tell me, some guy sent me an email, "What are you going to stop people from having their family come from Miami?" I'm thinking, well, what do you want me to do with that? So it's just not going to be perfect. But I agree, Commissioner Tobias. I think this is probably easier wording, and I think it'll still get the same purpose
And
done.
if anyone, and I'll pull a 20 out of my pocket, if anyone can tell me how, in any realm of possibility or reasonableness, this could ever be enforced if we have a catch-all, hi, I'm complying with the law, under penalty of, it can be beheading or defenestration, which is a fun word meaning to throw someone out of a window. How could you possibly get anyone in a position where that's enforceable? I don't see it, but I guess I'll be keeping my 20. So I'll call the question. So all in favor of Commissioner Tobias' motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. Commissioner
Sorry.
Smith, did you vote, sir? Was he aye?
Okay.
I presume based on his seconding, he's in the affirmative. I'll treat it as the
Yes, I voted yes.
Okay. So 4-1 on that. Motion carries. And I keep my 20. All right, let's see. Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to give a shout out to all of the firefighters and law enforcement for their bravery in this very difficult time. They are on the front lines of this virus. We're sending them into harm's way when we send them into homes for whatever reason. So we need to do everything we can to protect and support them, and that includes prayer.
Anything further, sir?
No, that's it.
Commissioner Isnardi?
Yes, and I'm glad he sort of brought that up because that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. I have a genuine concern regarding, obviously more concern now that we've had some positives, but I have a genuine concern about the safety of our firefighters and likely the safety of our deputies. But my concern is that I'm hearing that a lot of municipalities are leaving it to Brevard County to don the PPE to go into these situations, potentially dangerous situations, not just for our firefighters and for our deputies, but for the residents as well. And they're sort of deferring to us. And the feedback from some municipalities is that they don't have enough PPE. So, and whether or not that's true, I've not called each municipality. This is something I learned later this afternoon. But I would like some sort of inventory on, what these other municipalities, since we do support these municipalities and we are the transporter for every medical unit in the county, I want to make sure that we do some sort of inventory, some sort of temperature check to see where these other municipalities are because, we're all in this together. We need to work as partners with our municipalities, but we need to make sure that we're not unnecessarily putting our guys at risk. I mean, we essentially, if this is true, we essentially just told people not to donate PPE to the county. Remember, we advised them to donate it to nonprofits, which I'm sure that they need as well. But if we have first responders in our municipalities, we need to see what we can do to help them if they don't have the proper PPE equipment. But, everyone pays taxes for Brevard County, first responders and deputies. I want to make sure that we're not putting our guys at extra risk because municipalities aren't stepping up or that they don't have the correct equipment. It may not be their fault, but I just would like some sort of report as soon as possible. I'm sure there's somebody at the county that can spend the time in putting this together and get back to us and let us know the status because we're all in this together. And secondary, issue for me is I want to make sure that our message out to the public is to not overuse the 911 system unless we absolutely have to. Oftentimes, and if you've done a little research or you've heard any feedback at all from not just residents but from people on the front lines, you hear that people are calling for, help to the bathroom. They're calling for, trips to the ER that may not be quite as necessary. But I just want to make sure we're not overusing the system because, again, we're not just putting our firefighters and our deputies at risk by sending them into all of these non-emergent calls. We're putting residents at risk because, it's not a perfect system as far as decontaminating and, going from one house to the next. It's easy to pick up something. So I just want to make sure that we're all safe. We really have to keep our first line people safe, and I want to make sure that we're doing everything in our power to do that. So if Commission doesn't have a problem with it, I would like some sort of report. It doesn't even have to be fancy, but I want to make sure that these municipalities have the correct PPE equipment that they need, and I want to make sure that we're not unnecessarily putting our folks at risk.
I agree.
Is there a motion or?
Jim?
We need a motion for that?
Commissioner, we will get you.
Thank you.
Emergency management has been tracking the PPEs. They are prioritized in how they're given out dependent. And I believe they already have that information put together, and we will get that out to the board quickly.
Because I realize that we have enough PPE equipment for our guys, at least right now. But I want to make sure, which we just purchased, I want to make sure these other municipalities have it as well. I'm not saying that the county needs to give up our supplies because, like I said, we do the most in the county. I just want to make sure that our guys aren't unnecessarily being put at higher risk if we're all in this together and we're all helping as far as emergency response goes.
Right. We understand, and we will get you that information.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and pass the gavel for the moment to Commissioner Pritchett. Don't touch the gavel, though. And I want to make a motion in furtherance of what Deputy Mayor John Ditmore from West Melbourne suggested. I'm not going to move to do exactly what he suggested. I don't know that 5 is the magic number per 1,000 square feet, but I would make a motion to recommend to the policy group that we implement a measure obligating all establishments to take reasonable steps to ensure that individuals are enabled to maintain a distance of no less than 6 feet from one another. Now, that could mean 20 people in 1,000 square feet. It could mean 5 people in 1,000 square feet. It's up to them. I don't want to interfere and say that there's a magic number, but that would be my motion. Commissioner Pritchett?
Oh, I'm the chair. I'm going to call on Commissioner Tobias first.
Have my button
You were
pushed.
reaching.
Yeah, thank you. So I just did the math, which is scary, but you're looking at about 144 square feet. When you do that 6 feet all around, you divide that by 1,000. I think 5 sounded cool, so that's why, Mr. Ditmore thought of it. 7, I guess, would be more accurate if it's in CDC guidelines. But again, are you foreseeing any type of penalty associated with this? I'm concerned.
Second-degree misdemeanor.
Okay. What would you do with establishments that don't have 1,000 square feet?
That's why I wouldn't make it a square footage requirement. It would simply be it would be contingent upon them taking appropriate measures to ensure that folks don't, or that they have the ability, I should say, to maintain social distance. If they have 100 square feet, that may mean they have fewer people in there.
Who would define what appropriate?
If you have a physical impossibility for people to make a 6-foot gap between one another due to folks having flooded in an area, I think that would be clearly inappropriate.
Is there any medical evidence that shows that limiting folks that go into a private business lowers the threat of the transmission of the virus?
That's the darndest thing. I never realized the virus transmission was contingent on whether it's a private business or another location.
Commissioner Tobias, let's ask Commissioner Isnardi that, if that's all right. Commissioner Isnardi, can you have any thoughts on that, ma'am?
Well, half of it cut out, the audio did, but I did hear part of it. My concern with this is who's going to police it, number one. Number two, again, I mean, I don't know how you would manage such a thing. I mean, are you comfortable with an elderly person who doesn't understand the rules being charged with a crime?
We're talking
that's the
about
kind of stuff I worry about.
two things. As far as policing it, I think this is only going to be policed, if at all, in cases where it's extreme, namely where people are all over each other in stores. And then as far as an elderly person being charged, this wouldn't be the folks that are in the actual store. This would be the folks that allow them to come into the store beyond reasonable numbers.
Commissioner Smith, do you have any thoughts, sir?
Yeah, but what if they're close together in the store?
We can't have
Is
perfection.
it up now to the store owner to spread them apart? I mean, I'm not sure
No.
how we would even enforce this.
No, but if they have 100 people go into an area that's 10 foot by 12 feet, that's a problem.
Commissioner Pritchett, you asked my opinion. I'm thinking that I don't want this to become a police state just because we have a virus that we're dealing with. And I think the penalty is hard to determine because we're going around in circles with that. And I think going back to what Sheriff Ivey said, people usually try and do the right thing. And I can tell you, based on the calls and emails my office has been getting, there are people that, most people out there are already very aware of the circumstances that we're all in. So they kind of self-police themselves. I was at Publix today, and there wasn't anybody willing to be close to me, nor I close to them. So I don't know anything like this is even necessary.
Okay, Commissioner Lober, I wouldn't mind thinking about it a little bit, but I was in Target, they got little stickers up, you got to stand there, you're not allowed to get close. Walmart, they've diminished it to a certain percentage, they have people standing out line. Publix, I walk by, they all got the mask and the gloves on, so I don't mind thinking about it a little bit, but I do have a little bit of agreement with Commissioner Smith. I'm seeing a lot of people kind of do this on their own. So if you wouldn't mind, sir, maybe not doing a motion so it doesn't get denied, you can bring it back later. But
If it dies for lack of a second, it dies for lack of a second. I'm happy to allow that, but I think people need to be
Okay.
on the record as standing wherever it is that they stand.
okay, but I'm going to call the question here for a second. Is there a second, by the way? Okay, I'm just going to let it die for lack of a second, give you back the mic then.
All right, perfect. All right, anything else?
I would like to point out also that Home Depot is restricting people in. They've limited it to I don't know how many, but they let people in and then they count, and then they have somebody at the exit counting, so they make sure everybody comes out before new people go in.
And Commissioner Smith, just a last comment since you brought it up. There is absolutely no ambiguity as far as the fine. There's nothing back and forth. 60 days Brevard County Jail max, $500 fine max, and or. So with that said, it died anyway. So I'll go ahead and
Chairman?
adjourn it. Say again? Commissioner Darty?
I think you're at greater risk of throwing a bunch of people in jail than you are. I mean, that's all I'll say about it.
It's kind of like urinating in public. If you know that it's illegal, you're not going to do it. I don't think you're going to have anyone in jail on account of that because, again, when people realize it's illegal, they're not going to do it. But we'll go ahead and adjourn it at 6:33. Thank you all.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.